Well, literally went out. And after contact.
I used to like the calendar. But it's like. Like yesterday. Yes, good, I like it. That's tables are set up well. So all the staff. Right, but all of that stuff. And then it stops right away. Oh, no.
I did tomorrow hours.
Last one, right?
But I was like tonight.
You are not. I use will pray.
Oh.
Yeah.
You are?
It'll cool off really quickly. Yeah. Have to jack back on. Thank you.
I like the ball.
Yes, thank you.
That's the old memory.
I know, thank goodness. I was missing the character at the end. Thank goodness.
I know.
That's about something.
I'm stretching my brain.
Wow.
I'm glad.
Like I
Sorry,
said,
we don't do that much anymore.
I'm not gonna complain. I know that's good.
I'm
I'm
with
with
you.
Everybody good to go? All right, welcome back. We will reconvene open session at 6:20. No action taken during closed session. Student information update. Diego, will you start us off for ECA? Thank you.
So, I am Diego Faro, and at ECA during the month of August, we had our Link Crew orientation. Basically, the freshmen came and they met their mentors, and they went off to do some icebreaker activities that taught them kind of how high school life was gonna be, but also got them talking since freshmen are usually nervous in high school. And then they went back and they did a closing with Ms. Eichner, and I think it was very helpful for them to get used to high school. It's very different from the school. Then during the freshman and new student orientation, they got familiar with Schoology, which is what ECA uses for homework. And they got to run out how ECA works since the schedule is so different, and it's obviously helpful because it's not like a traditional high school, so they got used to it. And then we had our back to school night on the 31st. They had some they had snacks and activities, and the parents got to meet the teachers, and I think parents had a good time. Then for homecoming this year, the theme was chosen to be a night in the city, and ECA has the theme for the float as Beetlejuice, the play. I think students are super excited to build the float, especially leadership students. So yeah, that's all for the month of August.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, for Leading Edge, Tammy.
Hello board members, my name is Tomby and I'm a 7th grader and I'll be representing the Leading Edge Academy for the 2022-23 school year. Today I'll be telling you what we have accomplished in the month of August. To start off the 2022-23 school year, we started with the school-wide behavior matrix, which we went over together as a school in an assembly. Soon after, we started some of the clubs up like Taiko and 8th grade art club, yearbook, and cross country. And some sports also started up like flag football and volleyball. We had the student board selections in ASB or Associated Student Body Representative elections and new web members. And 6th graders are feeling very welcome and excited. We recently had back to school night and picture day. And additionally, we were presented at the city's 32nd annual Chocolate Festival led by one of our LE teachers with the art club during the Labor Day weekend. Along with some fun, we also got started on some of our academics. For example, at the beginning of the year, I-RD diagnostics for math and English were completed, and this helps teachers get an idea about our skills as students. And recently, Study Hall started, which is led by our instructional aides, and it gives us students a chance to catch up on any work and get extra support. Study Hall is Tuesdays and Thursdays after school from 2:45 to 3:45 p.m. and the first session was on September 1st. That's all for this month's Leading Edge Board Report.
Great, thank you. All right, next up for PFAA is Keith.
Hi everyone, my name is Key Matias. I am the Vice President for PFAA, and so this is what we have for this month. So to start off the school year, Senior Sunrise happened on the very first day of school. So this happened at the park that's near Intercom. And so it was basically just a really great way for the seniors to start off their final year, just a little activity before the school day. And so next we have the Middle School Fall Social. So this was ASB's first event that happened in the year. It was on August 26th and it happened in the amphitheater. And it was the biggest turnout that we've had in a while. So students here were all able to socialize with each other and with their friends, and they were able to purchase food at this event. We also had ASB membership sales happen from August 25th to August 30th, and here we made about 180 plus sales. So basically, for those of you guys who don't know, ASB stands for Associated Student Body. So it's just student council where we plan out where we plan out the school's events and just decide things that go on around PFAA. And so basically, as student council members, we get different benefits. So we get to go to the dances for free because we're the ones who plan it, obviously. So memberships are basically an opportunity and a chance for other students who aren't in the student council to experience some of the benefits. So they get to get discounts on dances, socials, and even the yearbook. And also they get a free entrance to Day Out the Green, which is the final event of the school year. And also here we also give out physical prizes as well to the students. So in the past, we've given out things like tote bags, lanyards, and pop sockets. So back to school night also happened, which was on August 30th. So this was just basically a chance for the parents to go around to their students' classrooms and understand what's going on with their learning. And also ASB was able to sell memberships throughout. So we made a lot of sales during then. We also had picture day on September 1st, so it's pretty cool. So some other things that did happen that aren't listed here, we had our homecoming theme announced, so that is Night of the City, as one of the representatives already mentioned. So this homecoming is going to be happening on September 24th. And during that week, we're going to have a bunch of other events like Charter Bowl, an awesome lunch, float parade. So it's going to be a really exciting week coming up. We also had Chalk It Up during Labor Day weekend. So for students, some students of PFA, I included, and 2 others, we were sponsored by Assembly Member Kevin McCarty, and we got to spend the entire weekend just drawing on the sidewalks with chalk and our from the Jewel of Sacramento. So it was really, really fun and really cool. So we also had the Link Crew Social that happened on September 9th. And so if you guys don't know what Link Crew is, it's basically a program of upperclassmen, which consists of 11th and 12th graders. And there's also a program called Web, which is for 8th graders for middle school. And they basically mentor the incoming freshmen and the incoming 6th graders, just so that people can get adjusted to their new school life. And this is all I have for this month. Thank you.
All right, next up, PACT, Lillian Carter.
My name is Lillian Carter, and for this month's board meeting, I just wanted to talk about what we've done in the past month. So we just wrapped up our first month of school last week. PACT families attended orientations on August 11th and 12th. Families used the first month of school to meet with their advisors, register for enrichment workshops, and attend community activities. Workshops began today for all students. Project X orientation was on August 15th. Project X students have been coming on campus 1 day a week for the first month of school, then started our new 3-day-a-week schedule today. We had a field trip to the North Natomas Library on August 19th and our back-to-school picnic on August 26th at Natomas Regional Park. August 31st was the River Cats Assembly, followed by a visit from the Sacramento Fire Department and one of their fire engines. On September 8th, we hosted our first PACT Family Night, which was focused on our theme, Learn, Grow, Thrive in the Homeschool Hive. Families were invited to participate in bee-themed activities and crafts, as well as to visit an observation hive with real bees. And finally, we are excited to announce that one of our PACT students, Toussaint Batiste, was recently cast in an off-Broadway production of A Raisin in the Sun in New York. We are all cheering for him from his home base in Sacramento.
Thanks, Lillian. You guys, I'm so glad you're here, and you are more than welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to go home to your homework. So it's your choice. But we're very happy if you want to continue joining us, just don't feel obligated. All right, next up, hearing of the public for items not on the agenda.
We do have 2 public comments. I'd like to call up to the podium Ms. Slepsky. Ms. Slepsky, just so you're aware, I will start the timer once you begin speaking. You have 2 minutes. Sounds good. We're here a little bit last minute. Something happened today that we wanted to bring to the attention of the board. We're hoping to compel a little bit of support for our daughter. Our daughter's a PACT student. She's in 4th grade. And she attended last year virtually as a result of a exemption from Kaiser for not wearing a mask. And so she has issues with special needs, which I don't feel comfortable disclosing here publicly. But she does have communication issues, that are hindered through mask wearing, wherein she needs to see facial expressions. She needs to be able to hear clearly for proper communication. So in light of today, unfortunately, we were denied a virtual meeting and we were asked to attend in person while the advisor wore a mask, which would hinder communication for our daughter. And so we thought it was a reasonable accommodation to meet virtually. And we thought it would be an accommodation for both sides that would make both parties happy. We would accommodate the advisor, and then we would also accommodate our daughter so that there would be no hindrances, distractions, or influences at the meeting, and she could focus on the content and the communication without any issues. And so we're bringing this to the attention of the board today to compel support for students that need that accommodation for their needs. Because a virtual meeting, I think, is a very fair accommodation for both parties temporarily until the time comes where both parties can be present together and can see each other and communicate in a fashion that is conducive to both of them so that they can have a successful meeting together. That is the purpose today as I advocate as a parent for all special needs students that might need that accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. The board will follow up.
I'd like to call to the podium Mr. Slepsky. Mr. Slepsky, just like Ms. Slepsky, you have 2 minutes and I'll start the timer when you begin speaking.
Okay, like my wife said, she touched on pretty much everything I was gonna speak a little bit to, just in case she didn't have enough time. I kind of got home from work, got the tail end of what was going on, so she kind of filled me in. I did talk to the administrator briefly. Good conversation, we have a good rapport. So just a quick story though, I had to go to Kaiser recently, met a dietitian, and their mask. She's trying to talk, I'm trying to talk. I don't understand her, she doesn't understand me. We're getting nowhere. I left as bad a shape as I was going in. I couldn't understand her cues. I'm an adult. I've been in my profession 25 years almost. I got to communicate in my profession. We're trained. I was on SWAT team hostage negotiations, so we got to communicate. And if I was having a hard time, with my age and my experience, what about the 10-year-old? And I think, there you go, thank you for bringing up that Lincoln Academy. I guess you were saying something about freshmen. They come in freshmen, 14, 15 years old, have a lot of anxiety. So 10-year-olds do too. With going into her medical conditions too much, like we said, people do have autism, they have mental health disorders, they have physical needs. So there should be accommodations. I don't know if you'd rather us come in sick and meet face to face or whatever, but it's a fair compromise to have people that, to accommodate the advisor who would like to wear a mask and the student who'd benefit them not wearing a mask. I'm just trying to, rectify this at the lowest level right now. Through my work, I'm exposed to COVID constantly. Every fall, winter, we have an outbreak. So we got a big, point being, I think you'd rather us stay home if I had COVID. Likewise, accommodation should be made.
Thank you for your comment. The board will follow up. All right. Hearing of the public for items on the agenda.
Nothing else here.
Okay, thank you. Any comments for tonight's agenda from the board? Nothing. Okay, may I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Motion from Mr. King. May I have a second to approve tonight's agenda? Thank you, Ashante. Roll call vote. Ashante.
Yes.
Jennifer, yes. Preeti. Yes. Dr. Meharado.
Yes.
Gina.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Nita. Oh, Nita's absent. Where is she? Karen.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let's see, moving on to consent items. Any comments, discussion on the consent items for tonight? All right, may I have a motion to approve tonight's consent items? Karen, thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sean. Roll call vote. Karen?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Gina?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Preeti?
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. Ashante?
Yes.
All right. Action items. Approved 2021-2022 unaudited financial actuals. Anita?
Good evening, everybody. Glad to be here. So you guys gonna start that up for me? All right, so the books are finally closed. You could go to the agenda piece, this up too. So tonight we're gonna just do a brief overview of our revenues and expenditures, a summary of what our financial statements look like and our highlights. We have a lot to be to celebrate on what we spent last year and what we accomplished, cash flow and notes to the financial statements, and then what's gonna be next. But before I go through that, you have your unaudited actual packet, and I believe it starts on page 92 of your board packet. And so the first couple of pages is the executive summary, but I wanted to turn your attention to page 96. This is the official, what they call alt form. It's the alternative form for charter schools that don't use the SACS financial statements through the state. So the first page on page 96 is the certification page that Dr. Wood will be signing after tonight, as well as it'll go to the district and then to the county office. Starting on page 97 is the actual alt form. These are the financial statements. And pretty much the only thing that's different from our regular financial statements in this is it breaks out unrestricted and restricted funds separately. And so if you go to page 99, you'll see towards the middle, highlighted in yellow on my page, is our ending fund balance. The next page, page 100, is the actual balance sheet. So it lists our assets, liabilities, and fund balance broken out. And then page 101, basically you have to disclose if you use federal funds for any capital outlay or a debt service, which we don't. Page 102, a new question was supplemental state and local expenditures resulting from the presidentially declared disaster. And so that was above and beyond with the extra funds that the state had given us, and which we did not have to use any of our unrestricted funds, so that's no. And then the bottom section is for the every student succeeds section for our maintenance of effort for the federal government. So that's just a calculation on there. Starting on page 103 is the financial statements that you are used to. It has a column for our estimated actuals, our unaudited actuals, our budget that we brought to you back in June, and 2 years projected out. And so the good news is we are solvent. We can meet our obligations for the current and 2+ years. Also down at the page, at the bottom of page 103 in detail at your leisure, you can see the fund balance components broken out based on our financial reserve. You can see the two different programs for operating reserves versus program reserves on there. We are meeting our obligations as far as the financial policy for the reserve set-asides, as well as the additional program set-asides and facility set-asides that we have across there. On page 104 is the detail by object code, same information, just listed out more in detail. And then 105 and 106 is the same financials broken out by academy. All academies did really well this year. With VLA, we had a lower enrollment this year. That's why you'll see that they ran a little bit in a deficit. We also have updated our education protection account. So that's a required document that has to go on our website. And page 108, this I include on the unaudited actuals, and it's just basically historical information on our MOU fees that we paid in Natomas Unified. So you can see that we had about a 5% increase in the oversight category and about a 6% increase in our facilities category. And then the last page is kind of profit and loss statement. It's a financial trends, I call it, but it goes all the way from 12, 13, all the way to this year. And I kind of highlighted on that page, you'll see for 1920, 2021, that was the year of COVID. So you can see how the differences changed. And then in light blue is our unaudited actuals, which I'm calling post-COVID, but we're still kind of working through all those categoricals on there. So if you can turn to the next page. In starting with our revenues, compared to last year, it wasn't as much of a roller coaster ride on here, but it was a year of categorical funds, as well as a lot of spending plans that we brought to you. And so we had a 5.07 cost of living adjustment. Our enrollment was 1,896, and our funded P2 ADA, revised P2 ADA was 1817. That was about a 96% attendance ratio. If you remember, our normal trend prior to COVID has been about 98% classroom-based. So we fared very well compared to local schools. They were in the 90 to 92% range. And that's kudos to a lot of the staff and our TOSAs who worked on independent study packets to bring in and make sure that the kids were still learning while they had to quarantine and things like that. And then also we'll go over our local revenues. We did really well, E-rate rebates, as well as interest earnings very well. So the next slide here is a snapshot of our revenues. So for our local control funding for sources, we are getting $17.2 million. Federal, sorry, that is a typo on there. It's supposed to be, sorry about that, 475,000, I believe. I have an extra. Yes, 457,541 for federal. And actually, we did receive a lot more federal dollars because they backfilled some of the expanded learning categorical programs. At mid-year, they changed their mind and said, oh, we're going to use some federal savings dollars. So that came into play. 2.7 million in other state revenues. Again, a lot of that has to do with the state categorical programs that we got. Local revenues, the 1.9 million also includes special ed, which was about 1.1 million there. So total of $22 million just in revenues. If you go to the next slide, it's kind of a pie chart on that you can see that about 77% of our funds are generated based on the attendance. That is lower than previous years because of all the categorical funds on there. What's interesting to note here is that of that 77%, 33% was out of the education protection account, the sales tax money, where net state aid dropped to about 25%. That was really huge for us and stuff. And then property taxes made up about 19% of that. We still get about 2% in lottery funds. State special ed funds make up about 5%. And then the rest is the remaining 16%, which is made up of local funds, federal, miscellaneous funds. See if you go to the next slide. This is a snapshot for our expenditures. So we have all the categories listed there for certificated classified employee benefits, books and supplies, professional services, capital outlay, and other outgoing sources. So 20.3 million in expenditures there. So let me go to the next slide for the pie chart here. This pie chart for compensation, salaries, and benefits is about 83% of the total budget, so it's going up. And then the remaining 17% reflects the rest of like utility, supplies, services. Also about 3% for the district's MOU fees. Next one. So this is the total summary of our unaudited actuals. So we actually had an increase to our fund balance from the prior year of 1.7 million here. That includes 889,869 in restricted categorical funds. So you can see the side-by-side comparison of estimated actuals when we close the books and the variances. So we're really close on revenues. There's lots of changes, but net on revenues, we gained about 20,000. And then the most of it is the savings on the expenditure side. So looking at last year's unaudited actuals, we actually, from our estimated to our actuals, that surplus difference was about 1.5. So we're about 200,000 higher. It really has to do with all of the categorical funds. When you take out the almost 900,000 of the 1.7 million, I have itemized here some of the main savings. that we had about 48,000 more in interest earnings, which is great. Also E-rate, they caught up on some prior year E-rate reimbursements. We got about 52,000 there. One of the biggest chunks though is savings and contribution programs, which is over 511,000. That's mainly in the area of some special ed, but because of the categorical programs and the non-supplanting clause there and stuff, we needed to reclass some expenditures. We resulted in some savings in there, which generated one-time savings for us. So we were able to utilize the restricted money, free up some of the unrestricted side on there. Utilities, we saved about 20,000. Maintenance and operations service contracts, repairs, those type of things, we had about a $30,000 savings. But another big savings that we have is our property tax for Advantage Way. So that was about 118,000, and that's because we've been putting in our property tax exemptions. And so instead of cutting us a check like they used to, they're crediting us and stuff. So we had a savings there on that piece. So that, all of that, legal fees, again, it was like about $25,000 savings. So all of that miscellaneous stuff adds up to another 800,000 on stuff on that. So that's kind of what the difference is there. Also, on the financial statements for the board, we have itemized out the fund balance, but it's about 74% of total expenditures. Of that amount, the 14.9 million, 247,160 is made up of revolving fund, but it's also cash on hand with the banks. Then again, the restricted categorical programs, we have our 10% economic reserve. Also, we have 175,417 for other future obligations. That's supposed to be a 1.75 million. Sorry about that. For that type of. Ziva, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's the pie chart for the different categories here. So you can see that the percentages of this chart is of the total fund balance, not total expenditures. So of the 14.9 million, we have 14% just dedicated to economic uncertainties. Other reserves is made up of 40%. Cash and operating reserves to make sure that we can pay our bills on time and things like that is 33%. The restricted program piece is only about 6% of the fund balance. If you can do that. Okay, so some of the highlights there. One thing during last year, we received about $462 increase per ADA over the prior year. So that was really good. It averaged about 9,487. We also received an additional special ed money. So about 157,000 in growth funds as well. Scape also did very well this year, coming back from COVID. They actually, their revenues exceeded their expenditures. So they have, they had dropped down to a $68,000 fund balance the previous year. It is about 100,000 now and stuff too. So they did really well. E-rate, as I mentioned, we also got the balance of the in-person instruction and expanded learning opportunity grant funds that came in. And that's what we're really focusing on spending this year, as well as new state funds for educator professional development, as well as the A to G success and learning loss piece that came in. And then of course, our favorite STRS on behalf phantom entry there, which is now almost $900,000, almost $1 million on that. On the expenditure side, we expanded staffing for special ed to meet the needs of students with disabilities. We also increased our paraprofessional work days. We had a couple of teachers on special assignment that were able to help us. They also were really instrumental in that short-term independent study process on there. Technology replacements, we did do all of our planned replacements plus some. That included computers for new staff, iPads and cards, replacement Chromebooks, and wireless equipment and cable infrastructure. And then again, the STRS on behalf entry on that. Next slide, continuing with expenditures, we funded step and professional level increases for staff. We had various increases to all the salary schedules, especially to meet the minimum wage requirements. We funded summer school as well. We provided additional supplemental supplies for all of our credentialed staff, as well as more additional professional development for them at their discretion. And we also provided tutoring services on that. So let's see the next. For cash flow, there was no cash deferrals this year. And we actually ended our cash balance with 17.8 million, which you might want to say, how did you do that? Because your fund balance is only 14.9 million. Well, it turns out the state over apportioned all the districts and stuff with their LCFF, so we have a liability to send that to them on that, so that's why. But normally cash is made up of assets minus your liabilities, that's your net fund balance and stuff. So not all the time your cash balance will match your fund balance. In this case, again, the state will be collecting that money through the periods of February through May of next year. We have to wait for the P1 apportionment cycle, so. Okay, so our next steps here, so next we will be, besides working with the auditors, that's my next step, getting them all their stuff. We will be, and they will also be giving you an audit report by December 15th of the year. And that will be based on the 2021-22 financials. We'll be updating this year's budget, 22-23, to reflect the actual beginning fund balance after we close the books. And then also, we will be bringing to you in December the first interim report. And the first interim report is the interim report with the most changes, because we estimated what we thought the budget was going to be in the spring. Then we have actual hires and placements and things that just come up. So we'll be bringing all of that together for you in December. After that, in March is our second interim report. And then we will do the adopted budget for next year and start closing the books, and the cycle continues over and over. So I'll open it up for any questions.
Any questions?
We really did accomplish a lot, and we do have a lot to accomplish this year with our money and stuff too. So thank you.
Right. Let's see, next item on the agenda. We should probably vote on
Yeah,
that,
we gotta
right?
vote on it, yes, please.
No, forget. All right, may I have a motion to approve the unaudited financial actuals for 2021, 2022?
Also,
Thank you, Dr. Mayfield. We have a second.
I'll second. This is Preeti.
Preeti, thank you. Roll call vote, Ashanti.
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. Preeti.
Yes.
Maria.
Yes.
Gina.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Woo-hoo. Okay, now we can move on to what I was so excited to talk about. Let's see. Approved 2022-2023 NCS teacher assignment. Laura.
Hi. All right, so because we're a public school, we always want to make sure that our teachers are appropriately credentialed. This request here is an option for schools to approve approve that the teachers are qualified to teach a course, even if it doesn't fit within their California credential area. So we have teachers that are credentialed teachers in career and technical education. That's their credential that they have from the state of California. And that is in the area of arts. So you see Rick Gott, who's a theater teacher, Jill Stripling, who's a dance teacher, Jim Vetter, who's an art teacher, Karen Pollard, who's a drama teacher. And so they have a credential for a career and technical education, or a CTE credential. And that technically credentials them to teach 9th through 12th grade. We are so lucky as to have a 6th through 12th program. And so those teachers, as a part of the continuum, teach middle school. And so the official credential they would need is a single subject credential in that area. There is an option for school boards to make a determination that the teachers are qualified without that additional credential. So saying that their career technical education credential would extend to the middle school ages. So we have our teachers here, and so what they're looking for is both time working in the career field as well as years that they have been teaching or instructing in the field. And so as you'll see there, we have, can you scroll down a little bit, or so I can see that top, so they can see the header, there we go. Our teachers for drama have over 30 years worth of experience teaching in the field of drama, whether that's in Natomas Charter School or other schools in the area or in other venues, as well as they have more than 30 or 40 years worth of experience in the field, which is one wonderful thing about our arts teachers here is that they are also artists currently in the field, and they have their CTE credential. So with that, the board can say, yes, this would allow them to teach classes that are lower than their CTE credential would require. If you now scroll up, please, we can see the other ones. Sorry. Then we look at, we have Jill Stripling and Jim Vetter, who also have quite a bit of experience teaching in their field and a number of years as well in their area. So any questions about the requirements or the amount of experience that we?
A piece just to add to what Laura said is, as a board member, especially if you've been here a couple of terms, you might be going, you've never had to adopt this
Right.
before, what am I looking at? So, you know, charter schools have this exemption on credentialing basically up until July 1st, 2025. So each school year, as we're getting closer and closer to that exemption time period ended, we're having to report our data out. And so there's actually a new statewide database that you're reporting all your teacher credentialing in. That just started last year. And so as we were reporting these teachers last year, we discovered they weren't considered qualified. And so we started doing some research with the school district and the county office, trying to say, like, surely someone who's taught drama for 45 years and can teach high school is also qualified to teach middle school. And the Commission on Teacher Credentialing realizes that this is a big problem that they have, especially in the area of arts, because arts teachers will often have the CTE credential. And if you teach the high school level class, you certainly would be qualified to teach the middle school level class. So they are trying to work on some updated regulations in the area of arts, but for the next couple of years, we'll probably be going through this process where the board is basically, that education code that Laura has cited there says that a governing board such as you all can make the determination that for an elective course, these individuals are qualified to teach that course based on their experience or a similar credential that they currently hold. We can only do this for elective courses. We couldn't do this for like math, English, science, social studies. It's only for the elective courses, which the arts counts.
So then each year, depending like if there's a new employee, then the board will vote again.
Actually, every year you will have to do this even with existing employees. Also, if like mid-year, let's say we had some sort of swap or something and Rick Gott picks up an extra class, we'll be back to have you approve that he's qualified to teach that particular class.
And as it stands currently, in order for them to get the single subject credential, they would have to go through a whole nother credential program, which would be very much the same classes that they've already taken to get their credential, minus a few. And so we're just trying to not add to their load as laws and things change, because we know that they're qualified, excellent teachers.
Yes.
So,
All right, well, I'm sure there's no objections from the board on certifying any of those instructors up there.
Yeah, I think it's a 25 plus. She was asking about Jim Vetter. I think it said 25 plus.
Oh,
yeah, I was wondering about that.
there's so many we could.
So many years.
So many years.
Okay.
Infinitely has experience in there. All right, may I have a motion to approve the NCS teacher assignments 2022-2023? Oh my goodness, that is a testament to how excited we are all to type this list.
She can take
I didn't hear who got the first one.
Pretty.
I'll second it.
Karen seconding.
Thank
All right. The good news is I get to take a roll call vote, so we all have a hand in approving this. Let's see, let's get to my roll call. Karen,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
Gina,
Yes.
Dr. Meharala,
Yes.
Preeti,
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes, Ashante.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Next topic. We get to establish an appointment committee for
Yeah.
the director's interviews and review of board terms.
So this is our annual review of board terms, and for those of you on the board, anyone watching from home, Natomas Charter School is a nonprofit board, it's a self-appointing board, so our board members are actually appointed by the board themselves after they've met with an appointment committee. We have parent representatives and we have community representatives, so we, if you look through the terms that are up there on the page, you will see that most people are not, they have a term until 2023, but we have Karen Harding Davis is up this year, Jennifer Morgan is up this year, and then Gina Lee is up this year. And so Gina and Jennifer have both shared that they would be happy to return. Karen did let us know that now she has a graduating senior year. She's not gonna be returning. So we are actually in the process of posting the PFA parent representative position that will actually post tomorrow. And then we will accept applications from all the candidates. And what we need to form is an appointment committee of basically no more than 3 board members that can assist with interviewing candidates. And we're looking at doing those interviews the afternoon of September 26th and September 27th, roughly from 4 to 6 p.m. So do we have anyone from the board who would be, who's available and would be interested in being on the appointment committee? Shante, thank you. All right. Anyone else? I need at least 2 to 3.
I possibly can do Tuesday.
Okay, pretty for Tuesday. And I think I saw Gina's hand come up. And then, and you and Jennifer, are you a maybe?
I would be an alternate.
Okay, Jennifer is an alternate. So
Not available on the 27th for sure.
So well, actually what we could do is we could have you on the 26th and Pretty on the 27th maybe. Does that work for you? You can't do the 26th,
I can't do
but you
the
can do the 26th, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we could potentially do that. So let's say that our appointment committee is going to be Ashante, Gina, Pretty, and Jen. But they're gonna be there alternate times, so they won't necessarily, 4 is not really a quorum for us anyways, because we have different numbers. So we'll be okay. So we need a motion to approve the formation of an appointment committee with Ashante, Pretty, Gina, and Jennifer.
Motion to approve.
Sean makes a motion.
From Sean, may I have a second?
I second.
Maria seconds.
Duke it out. Who got it? Maria? Okay, roll call vote, Sean.
Yes.
Ashante?
Yes.
Jennifer, I'm a yes. Maria?
Yes.
Karen? Yes. Gina?
Yes.
Preeti? Me? Yes.
Thank you. So Ziva and I will reach out to the appointment committee members to kind of get things set up. So if you know of any PFA parents that you think would make excellent candidates for the board, encourage them to apply. Next one.
Okay, Karen. Let's see, California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, Laura.
And Joe.
Joe.
You get both of us. Yeah, I can go first,
I
yeah.
missed it.
So we kind of did a little,
Say you.
we did a little sleight of hand after we did that.
We're a tag team.
We're made slides. So, I guess she has to stand on the podium. So tonight, I asked Laura, Laura's gonna help us dig deep into the data. But before we dig deep into the data, I thought it was kind of important to talk a little bit about the context for this data. So if you can go to the next slide. So remember, tonight we're gonna be talking about data from the spring of 2022, right? A few months ago. The last time we had comparable data was the spring of 2019. So we have now gone through the 1920 school year, which remember that was the school year that ended abruptly in March. At Natomas Charter School, we sent kids home with some packets, and then we quickly modified that a few different times. And we had teachers teaching, but it was really crisis response, right? As teachers were teaching with adaptations. Then we went into the 2021 school year, which we called our location flexible learning plan. Remember back in May of 2020, We came up with a plan that said, hey, we might see kids on campus, we might not see kids on campus. Everyone thought we were a little bit crazy for coming up with that plan, but thank goodness we did come up with that plan, because that actually meant as we went through that school year, we were able to deal with distance learning. We had the learning hubs where we had special education English learner students coming onto our campus. We also then in February, were able to bring back our elementary students in hybrid, and then in March, our secondary students in hybrid, and then by April, we were bringing everyone back. But in that school year, remember, only about 70% of families chose to bring their kids back to campus. We still had about 30% of our families choosing to stay home. So 30% of our student population went from March of 2020 all the way until June of 2021 without setting foot on campus. Then last school year, that's our 21-22 school year, we had everyone back on campus, right? And so our focus last year was really on rebuilding community and re-norming, right? And I think about my son, who was a sixth grader, he's now a freshman this year, right? So sixth grade year was the closure year for him. Seventh grade was that wacky distance learning year. Eighth grade was his last year of middle school, where we were somewhat normal back on campus, but we're all kind of recovering from the pandemic. And now he's a freshman. I think it's also important to think a little bit about, as we look at this data, we as a society ask schools to not only educate our children during this time period, we ask schools to pick up so many other responsibilities that aren't typically school responsibilities. So you'll see, we're running a community vaccination clinic. I'm pretty sure Ziva wore out at least one pair of shoes working in the community vaccination clinic along with other people here. I mean, we literally help vaccinate thousands of people in our community. I have literally lost count of the number of COVID tests that we have administered or handed out. It's in the tens of thousands at this point, right? We provided public health and medical guidance. I know over the summer when I got COVID, I definitely knew more than my doctor did about what I was supposed to do, because we've been that public health official. We provided at-home technology access. So our IT department, I was talking to them about this poll. I want this poll to come down. And I'm like, why is the poll not down? And they reminded me that, Joe, for the last 2 years, we've been handing out 2,000 Chromebooks and strategizing with all the parents about their home internet access. I was like, oh yeah, good point. We were really thinking about the poll and the LNC. And then we were looking at new methods of delivering food, right? So our cafeteria staff have been amazing. We had drive-through, we had bags of food, we had all this like plastic container situation, which none of us like from a waste standpoint, but it was making sure everyone got food. And then we provided all these virtual models for families, right? Like I mentioned, we closed in March, but I know by June 2020, we had redone our virtual instruction 3 different times. And then when we went into the 2021 school year, and everyone thought we were crazy for our location flexible learning model, we were making adaptations along the way. Like, oh, this hybrid thing isn't working. Let's really try this. Let's try cameras on. Let's try cameras off. And then I think finally at the end, we have had, and we still are, managing a very politicized public health situation, right? Where people are upset about masks, or who's wearing masks or who's not wearing masks. Last year we had to have a parent removed from campus for yelling at staff members over masks. And so I think that it's important as we look at this data to remember we've gone through 3 very tumultuous school years, and we've turned around and also asked schools to do things that they have not ever normally done.
And the things that you didn't mention on the mental health side.
Oh, yeah.
How much our staff took on with extra mental health, including Dr. Ellis going to do home visits for families, and in some instances being law enforcement support for families to make those referrals. So in addition to all of those COVID-related things, we can't forget the mental health supports that were also provided during the last 3 years.
So then going to the next slide, it says a little bit of the context. So what does the research say? So there's actually some research on what will happen when schools close, because you think we've had things like Hurricane Katrina, or we've had earthquakes, or we've had political unrest in other countries where schools have closed for an extended period of time. And what the research shows is that we should see in this data really significant learning loss. We should not see our students performing like we may have seen in 2019. We've been, during the pandemic, we kept a really close watch on our student progress through our iReady assessments, and we were seeing that students were making growth. If you look on the research, you shouldn't have actually seen that. We should see that, it might take 2 to 3 years for kids to return to prior academic levels. We should see significant decreases in our high school graduation rates and our college acceptance rates. We should see students actually leaving school altogether, maybe an increase in overall dropouts going on to work to join the workforce, because maybe they're having to help their family, or they're worried about mental health or things that are going on. And we should also see that there's greater impacts for students who had fewer resources. So let's say you were a situation where maybe your parents didn't speak English, or maybe you're in a situation where you're homeless, or maybe you're foster youth, we might see some differences, greater differences in the data, or greater disparity in the data than maybe we've seen before. And then, you know, what's really kind of interesting is in some of the research, especially in other countries where there's been political unrest, a lot of the patterns in disrupted schooling were mitigated based on the parent education level in the household. So there's actually one study where they were looking at learning disruption in Pakistan during an earthquake. And what they saw is that if parents had any sort of formal schooling, those students actually had less learning mitigation losses than students where the parents didn't have any formal schooling. So I share that because that's what we should kind of expect, you know, looking at this data. Now, we knew this research going into this pandemic, or, you know, kind of quickly in the pandemic. And so at Natomas Charter School, we've been very intentional in terms of what we're doing. So we had that location flexible learning plan. We've adapted. Our students have adapted too, though, and our parents have been extremely supportive throughout the entire process. And so what that means is, you know, today is Laura's going to be talking about the data. The trends that you're going to see is, you know, counter to the research, we actually still have very strong graduation and college acceptance rates. Counter to the research, you know, our ELA scores, when compared to 2019, so pre-pandemic, you're going to see our overall flat, but our math scores have dipped a little bit, but that's to be expected based on the research. But tonight, you know, one of the challenges that we have in sharing the data with you is the data is not yet public. So what that means is that we can speak to the board and the community about our own data, but we can't give you context of how we compare maybe to the school district or to other charter schools or even to the state. The state data is not even available at this point. We haven't seen it, but we have been able to look at some community comparisons here in Sacramento. And tonight, as you're looking at the data, realize that these data points are significantly higher than what is happening in the rest of the community. And so I think is a real testament to the intentionality that our staff, parents, and students really put into navigating this pandemic. And tonight, you know, so tonight, the data conversation that we're going to be having tonight is really a two-part conversation. So tonight, Laura's going to be talking a little bit about how our students did, you know, through the end of the 21-22 school year in terms of our school-wide metrics that we're looking at. And then next month, each of the 5 principals will actually be presenting data on how their individual academies did, but also we now have our iReady data, right? So we're not only looking at where kids were at the end of last school year, we're actually looking at where kids are now. And then therefore, what are we doing, you know, if we know this particular group's struggling in math or this particular group's really excelling in English language arts, like what are we doing with that data as we move forward? So the principals will be here in October to present that. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context as we look at this data, because now we're gonna jump into the data rabbit hole and I'm gonna hand it over to Laura.
All right, next slide, please.
Digging in, let's dig in. All right, so first of all, here at Natomas Charter School, we know that standardized test scores are not the only way that we know that students are learning. This is just a way that the larger society looks at it and that our school is judged in those ways. So, you know, keeping in mind that as we're digging into this data, we at Natomas Charter School really do look at the whole child, right? And we look at all of the things. So it's things from, you know, watching them perform, watching them, you know, put together an awesome, you know, orientation or a link crew. You know, we see these different things that students are doing, projects in class, presentations, portfolios, all of those things are what shows us our students are learning, in addition to the state assessments. And then, you know, we keep all of that in mind as we're working with and supporting our students. Next slide, please. All right, so exciting. We're getting closer and closer to having a more normal California dashboard for schools. So these are the elements that are usually a part of the California dashboard. The ones that are pink are our local indicators. So these are things that we report and we assess at the school level, and then we report and upload it into the California dashboard system. So the pink ones we did last year, and that was pretty much it for the whole dashboard last year. So there was nothing surprising since we submitted it, right? And then you'll see that there are orange ones. These are ones where we're starting to set up our baseline, because you can't really compare students in 2019 to students in 2022. It's really apples and oranges. right? Because we were pre-pandemic and then post-pandemic. What's happening is all of the scores that we're setting up right now are going to be our new baseline for looking at the dashboard. If you remember, the dashboard always looks at where your scores are this year, but then they're looking at, are you showing growth in your different areas? So, you know, if your math scores, are you showing growth, right? Are you growing? And they'll even look at subgroups and different, grade levels, like looking, are people growing within these things? So that's kind of the function of the California School Dashboard. So we've got a lot of them that are setting up the baseline. And then our college and career, it's going to be another year. So next year we will be able to see growth in all of the orange categories, and then the following year in the college and career. So we're building back up to the glory of the California School Dashboard. All right, so next one, please. So as we are following our LCAP, which is how we set all of our strategic goals, we follow different data that we look at to ensure that our students are meeting those goals. And so I have an update for you on some of those metrics, which are in the area of college and career preparation. We actually won't get the data till probably the end of September, whenever the dashboard comes out, for how many of our students have completed one college course. It's just a function of how the data comes in. I mean, we can do our own calculations, but I'd rather it be exactly what the state is going to report. But we did see a growth in the number of students that were A through G eligible with this last graduating year, which makes sense because we had some students during the pandemic that had the option to take a pass, no pass on a class, depending on how their COVID year went. And so, you know, you're not going to get that A through G eligibility if you're taking pass, no pass for, say, your chemistry class or your, math class. Let's see. We had an increase in students completing their CTE pathway, which here at Natomas Charter School are our arts pathways. So you can go through drama, through music, visual arts, dance. And then we saw an increase, which we celebrated last year, in our seal of biliteracy. So we had more students that were earning that, and we hope to continue to expand on that. So that's looking really good. So go ahead and go to the next one, please. As we're looking at our different subgroups that we look at for students that are meeting the college and career readiness indicators. So this means that their CTE, they have completed their CTE requirements. They've completed their A through G requirements. They've hit those ticks for moving on to post high school. And so you'll look at our percentages, and we have actually grown school-wide. We have a couple of areas that have dipped a little bit. If you look at our first one there, Filipino, that's a very small population of students that were in that graduating class. So just one or two can really make a difference there. And then we do see a little dip in our socioeconomically disadvantaged students, which, as Joe talked about before, we know that that students with less resources were hit a little bit more hard with the pandemic and things. And so that's something that we're working hard to make sure that we're helping to make up for. But overall, that's not what we expected, to see growth almost everywhere. So we're quite pleased with a positive movement for most. Next one, please. And then we look at college acceptance rates, which are phenomenally high, especially at this point in time in history. We had a large increase of students that applied to college compared to the previous year, which you remember, the class of 2021. Every college was looking like it was going to be online, so there wasn't a lot of motivation for kids and families to apply to that university so you could sit in your bedroom at home on the computer again. And so we did see quite an increase, more normal numbers for students applying, which is encouraging because we're one step closer to normal. And then our acceptance rate was 95, which is a little dip from 97, but when you're only dealing with about 120 kids, it's pretty negligible.
Doesn't it follow too, if we had a larger portion of the class applying, we'd have a lower acceptance rate?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Okay, next one, please. All right, I get to talk about LCAP, which is the assessment that we give to our students that speak another language. And so they're given the LPAC test every spring to see their growth in their use and learning of English. So just a little reminder that we're looking here at listening and speaking, reading and writing. So it's all elements of English language communication. And we have different score levels. So we have well-developed. So if the students get a 4, then they have the possibility of being reclassified as English proficient. Moderately developed, somewhat developed, and minimally. All right, next slide, please. So this is where our overall scores rounded out. We had 28 that were well-developed, which is great because I think last year we had 44, but that meant that most of those kids got reclassified. So this is a whole new group for the most part. I think there were 3. 44% that are moderately developed, 28 somewhat. So we're seeing students moving across the spectrum. We're seeing them make progress, and then a couple beginning to develop. So what we'll have 28 possible reclassifications coming your way. But we are just waiting on seeing how the kids are adjusting to the new year and those iReady scores to make sure that they're solid and they're good. Okay, next slide, please. This is the slide that I think is the most interesting, as this is broken out by grade level. So you can see where the different levels are. You'll notice that kinder and first grade have quite a few of the lowest score because they're just starting out, right? Some of those students are coming to us and this is the first time that they're in an English environment. And so they're growing and they're making progress as they go through. Sometimes also when we test the young ones, when they first come in, if we have a new student that's new to California schools that speaks another language at home, we would do an initial assessment with them. And some of the little kindergartners, they showed up as needing extra support, but a lot of times they're just kind of shy. And they're like, you want me to what? You want me to write a letter there on that line? You know, what's the deal? So that's really encouraging that we have a lot of them that are moving through the spectrum. One thing that's very interesting is that we're getting up in 6th and 7th grade and 10th grade, some students that are scoring low. And that to me is actually encouraging. It might seem counterintuitive, but that means we're getting students who are new to the country coming to Natomas Charter School. So, which has not been something that has been historically happening at Natomas Charter School. And that's really exciting because that means that families who are moving to California, who are maybe moving to the US, know about Natomas Charter School and they know that it's going to be a good place for their children to come. And oftentimes that is because they know other families, they have family in the area, and personally, I love that we're reaching new groups at Natomas Charter School. Actually had a mom, or I guess an aunt, calling me about her sister and her family were coming over, and so she wanted to get her nephew all signed up for our school so that right away he could just come right in. And that's the type of thing that you want to see, is that people know about Natomas Charter School and want their kids coming here. So that's an exciting new challenge for all of our teachers as the students are coming in and they're learning English for the first time as the older grades. And so that's super encouraging. And we see lots of students moving through the progression as well. Go back one, sorry. supporting our students. But one thing that we are really focusing on is what are called our long-term English learners. So those are English learners that have been in the system, in the California system, for 5 or 6 years or more. And so that means that those students have some areas that need to be supported so that they can continue to excel. And so we have our new EL TOSA, Alyssa Ortiz Khan, who is here, and she's already digging in and working with the students and supporting them. So it's really exciting. Okay, now you can go to the next one. All right, CASP. For any of you who forgot, CASP is for grades 3 through 8 and 11. The science test is only grades 5, 8, and high school. Let's see, we do math and English for CASP. Super exciting. All right, next slide. Okay, just a reminder, folks. This is us before the pandemic, right? We're just hiking along, we're having a beautiful time, going up the hill. Next slide. And we knew that students were coming to us with different situations, right? Some of them have little tiny backpacks. There's not much weighing them down as they're going up the hill, right? We have some kids with just a regular size backpack, you know, holding them back a little bit. And then we have some students that are coming to us with some serious headwinds, right? They have to take that huge backpack up the hill with them. And that's our job as educators at Natomas Charter School, is to make sure that we're giving them the support they need, right? And we're helping them out, you know, like this little guy on the right, you know, somebody's going to need to help him kind of, you know, move on up the hill, or maybe take some things out of that big backpack, right? And so, you know, that's always been our case. That will forever be our case. We know that not every student is just alike, and we need to support them all in the ways that they need. Okay, next. And then we hit COVID, and it was kind of like climbing Everest, and there was a storm, and there were winds. And I don't know if any of you have ever hiked up a very tall mountain in a storm. I have. You slide down a little, right? You're like, I'm making progress. And you're like, no, I'm not. I only went an inch or two. So it was pretty challenging, but I think we did well. We had a lot of resources and amazing you know, community and staff and students. All right, next one. So here we are, post-COVID, the sun is starting to shine, right? We still have some place we need to go. We still have the same group of kids, but they're a little weary, right? They're a little tired. And so I just want us to keep that in mind as we're looking at the data, that we know we have places we have to go, but it's the same destination. It's the same trail that we're going to be taking. We just didn't know there was going to be that mountaintop in the middle. All right, next one. Okay, so Joe talked a little bit about the trends that we're seeing. Overall fairly flat. A little couple dips here and there for the English language arts, which really makes sense, right? Because if students are at home, and as parents, I know all of our parents of all of our students were like, okay, how can I support my kid? The easiest and most available thing is to say, here, read this. Right? Read a book. You know, go look up something online. Let's read. Let's keep our brains moving. And so that is the most accessible piece. So, okay, go ahead to the next one. So these are our English language arts CASP scores for the different grade levels in 2019, 2021, and 2022. And if you look, 2021, we only tested our juniors. Everybody else we gave iReady assessments to. So those are the only ones. That's why that's all we have. And if you look here, it's not that bad, and some of them have even moved up, right? So, you know, it's looking pretty good. If you look at like our third grade, we're 42, now they're 56. It's a new group of kids, right? But that's where the third grade is progressing. So you'll see some slippage, right? We slid down that mountain a little bit in that snowstorm, but overall, we're not at the bottom of the hill again. And this is from what I've talked to a lot of other assessment people in the Sacramento region and a little farther beyond. And this is surprising, This is really surprising. We thought it might happen because we saw those iReady scores going. But overall, not too shabby, right? Would we like it to all be like, no, actually, I don't ever want to see 100% perfect because that's just not reality, right? Then what would we do? What would we do? I don't know, right? But we want to make sure that kids are learning and not burning them out because we're only thinking about their academics. Okay. Next slide, please. So let's talk about math. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I put it in the second slide. English language arts. So this is looking at the cohorts. Okay, the cohorts. So that means that this is the class of 2023, right? So these are our current seniors. They took the test last year. Then this is their 8th grade. The yellow is 8th grade, red is 7th grade, blue is 6th grade. So you see how they've been going along, right? So they were like 70s, and then they went up to 80. So they still kept growing, right? If we look at that group of kids. See class of 2026, right? So that's their 8th grade year, but that's not their 7th grade year. Oh no, this is 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade, right? So it's a little different when you've got 3 years based on, because they were younger, they were much younger. That was 3 years ago.
Can I
Yes.
ask a clarifying question on this?
Yeah.
Did you match the kids, or is this looking at, like for the class of 2026?
I didn't match all the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there will be some kids that would be like phasing out, right?
And
of
we
the
also
system.
have some kids
And
that
some
came in
adding
new
in,
ones during
right?
the pandemic.
Yeah. So for example, let's see. So this is 3rd, 4th, 5th, right? And then 8th grade. So these were the kids from Star Academy Impact with 3rd, 4th, 5th. And then 8th grade, those are all the kids at Leading Edge and PFA Impact. So we doubled in size. So it's not an exact like kid to kid comparison, but overall what we're seeing. So we're seeing positive trends with those kids, which is good because that's what you should see, right? Is every year students are doing a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Okay, next one, please. All right, now I get to our math. So overall, our math is lower. Remembering this is apples and oranges, right? This is pre-pandemic and post. But what I want you to look at here. We have some areas where we see big jumps, right? Which math has been our focus for quite a while. And we've been putting things in place. And it usually takes at least 3 years to see an impact in the students once you've put something in place. Because education is not instant gratification, right? It takes a while to build up. Right? It's kind of like going to the gym. You're not going to go to the gym one time and then be like, woo, I'm just like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? So we're really intrigued, and we've been looking into how did that 3rd and 4th grade, how did that pop way up, right? And one thing that we saw is that 3 years ago, we implemented a whole new curriculum at Star Academy, which is the bulk of them, in math. And they've been using it for 3 years. So those kids that's all they've known, right? And then same for 4th grade, they started it in 1st grade. So we're seeing that by putting things in place, eventually you see them starting to pop up, right? Now, we want everybody to be doing that same thing, right? But we're gonna have a few more dips here because of that lack of consistency. And as you get older, the harder it is in math, right? And I don't know how many parents, especially looking at like those 6th, 7th, 8th, and 11th graders, wanted to jump in and tackle algebra and geometry and trigonometry with their children while they were doing it virtually. I know that I feel like I earned the math grade in my house as well, having to remind myself how to do trig. On mine after 30 years, it was pretty awesome experience, right? But if you don't have that experience and that parent who's entrenched in education and has been doing it, it's going to be a really tough thing to do. So while we're not happy with these, we are next slide. We are looking at how we can grow. Looking at the same cohorts, we see that we are seeing a dip in math, right? We are seeing that drop. But unlike the English language arts, it's not as easy to build up. And if you're missing concepts in math, you're missing concepts in math, right? And so we are seeing a dip, but sadly, this is not the dip that people are talking about on the news. It's a much bigger drop is what they're seeing in the Sacramento area, local districts, local schools. I've been talking to people and they're a little bit jealous of where we are right now. So while it's not what we want and it's not necessarily pretty, our kids are working hard and they're learning. So we're working on that. Okay, next slide, I think. Yep. And we are putting in place new curriculum to support math. If you'll remember, right before COVID, we had just gone through the adoption process to get CPM, which is College Preparatory Mathematics, for our middle school. And so we did our first year of CPM online. It was really interesting way to do a curriculum, especially one that's all about discourse and talking and interacting in small groups. But we did it. And then last year we had our first year of it. And this is our third year this year. So we've been putting things in place. So we're hoping to start seeing that bump up. And then we've just this year adopted CPM for high school math. So we're moving it through. All right, go to the next one, please. All right, so we're looking here at our students by ethnicity because we do know that we need to be mindful of our different pockets of students that are not doing as well as others. And so what I wanted to show is, where we are. We actually, if you look at our scores, well, we want everyone to be at the all NCS rate, right? We want all of our students to be scoring at the same rate. We are 10 to 15% higher than other districts and schools in the area. So we are actually serving our populations better than many others. For English language arts, for math, we're 6 to 13% higher than what I'm seeing from my colleagues in the other assessment areas. So we still have work to do. It's work that we know that we need to do and we're focusing on, but we're making strides. We're making our way. Next slide, please. And then if we look at special programs, once again, we're seeing some dips, especially in the language arts. We're seeing some low areas, not what we want to see, but still we're 2 to 15% higher than what we're seeing in other areas. So we're working on it. We're in our fourth year, Addie, of our inclusive ed program here at Natomas Charter School. So we're starting to see some growth. And whoops, go back. There you go. But yeah, so we're striving to get all the students to where all of NCS is. Okay, next one. Okay, so moving forward, same path, same goals, right? We've just all kind of slid down the hill a little bit together, right? But we're going to keep tracking up it. We're still going to be focusing on our MTSS, which is our multiple tiers of student support. So that's looking at the whole child, looking at how can we support the whole child, looking at where do we see students starting to need support and how can we support them. Focusing on math, we have our math coach, Math TOSA, Courtney Selby, who's working with all of the teachers, getting them training, professional development. She brought them in for a week or 3 days before the school year started. They went to conference over the summer. So we are putting a lot of effort and support into them. And then the new CPM curriculum. And then we're going to continue to focus on our subgroups and making sure that we're supporting all students. And I know we just had the DEI meeting today, and I had the English Learner Support Committee, which is teachers and staff. We met, and they're pumped, they're ready, saying, how can we move this initiative forward? Here's some strategies, let's get it out there, let's support the students. So I think we are very lucky to have the staff that we have. Okay, next one, I think it's just, oh yeah. Hopefully y'all got your digital score reports. We have new PowerSchool parent portal access this year, so you can see your score reports. So that went out on Friday, August 25th. It's just what everybody wanted on their Friday evening, is to look at those. But the score reports, it's pretty interesting. If you go in there, parents can see all the score reports that their child has had for I think it goes back 6 years. And so you can go a little walk down memory lane with your child, looking at all their score reports. You can also put in attendance and look at grades and all sorts of fun stuff in there. But we sent that home, and then we'll send out paper copies of the score reports as if people request it. Because I know some people like to have that paper version put in the folder, right, and keep it forever. But for most people, I think it would be sufficient to have it in virtual. All right, next one. So where are we headed? So in October, you guys get more data fun. As Joe said, we are going to look at where are we going, right? That's where were we at the end of last year. So in October, you'll get to hear from all of our amazing principals talking about their individual academy data. All of the academies are looking at their data, analyzing it, determining how they can best support their individual students, and then looking at what is their data-informed response, and then what are the strategies and the instructional moves that they'll be taking. All right. Any questions? A lot of information, I know.
Congratulations.
I mean, so to kind of summarize a little bit what Laura said, we're looking at this data through kind of two lenses emotionally. One, a sense of pride, because we know as we're talking to others and we're looking at our data and we're like, wow, like all of the investments that we made and the different strategies that we tried seem to have paid off. But also with a sense of urgency. We're not satisfied with, where we're at on that hike. And we do recognize we've been in the snow and we kind of might have shrunk down a little bit in some places. And so trying to kind of look at it, through both of those lenses simultaneously, and really working with our teachers on helping them help us understand, what do they need next. We knew that some of these trends were going to happen. It's why we invested in our English Learner TOSA. It's why we invested in our Math TOSA. It's why we invested in math curriculum at both the middle and the high school level. Our EL TOSA, Alyssa, has already been working with our teachers on professional development. How can we better support our English learners? And similarly in our inclusive education department, really looking at how do we better serve students, because that initial research I talked about at the beginning, it told us that there was going to be a greater disparity. There was already a disparity between English learners and non-English learners, but it's only going to get wider as a result of the pandemic. And so our real focus now is on, okay, so how do we get better at serving those students, but then also what additional things do we need to put in place? Like, do we need to do an after-school tutoring thing, or a summer intervention thing, or an extra supplemental class? And those are some of the things that the principals are going to be talking about. Also looking in that elementary data, as Laura was seeing, our elementary teachers last year, not only did they have the 3 years of consistent curriculum that Laura was talking about, but they also really dug deep into differentiation intervention in their classrooms. So really assessing kids, making different groups that they're working with, and reassessing kids to see how that worked. And that third, fourth, and fifth grade they were sort of our little pilots on that. And so it's giving us some useful research and ideas for then how we can expand that to middle and high school to provide that same level of support.
And all of those things align directly with our LCAP, what we've been planning to do in our WASP action plan as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Next up, enrollment report from Dr. Wood.
Enrollment report. So in your packet, you'll find our latest enrollment data as of August 31st. And just a reminder to the board, enrollment, as Anita was talking about earlier, really drives revenue. So This time of year, we're keeping a close eye on enrollment. We are funded off of our enrollment as of the first Wednesday in October, which this year is fall break. So we're actually going to be funded off of our enrollment on the last Friday of September 30th. So as you look as of August 31st, basically leading edge is actually above their adopted budget enrollment. They are 266 instead of 261. PACT is below, although as we've talked about as a board before, PACT has had some employee turnover. I mean, actually all of our programs have had some employee turnover. So while we are at 140, we're also going to be adjusting our budget a little bit because we haven't necessarily been filling all of our positions. But Alicia and the team are also working on recruiting and working on ways to bring that number up. PFA, it's officially 749 on the 31st. They were in the process of adding a student, but they're basically at the budgeted amount. STARS at their budgeted amount, and ECA is actually over their budgeted amount. It says 110 here. When I looked the other day, I think we're at 112. So there's, this is that time of year where we have some going in, some coming out type thing. So from an enrollment standpoint, we're actually in a really good shape right now. Questions about enrollment? All right.
Strategic planning.
Last fun thing of the night that we're going to talk about tonight is strategic planning. So I have a couple of slides, mainly so I wouldn't get completely off track.
Joe,
Yeah.
time out.
Yep.
Guys, you really can go if you want. Again, you're welcome to stay. But
Or actually, why don't you do this? Text your rights, because this is our last item on the agenda. And so you want your rights to come in a timely manner. If you can pull out your phones and text your rights.
Yes, thank you
can
so
tell
much
them it's
for
completely
putting-
fine. We appreciate you being here.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about strategic planning. So this is actually a really exciting year. It's our 30th year of operation. You can go to the next slide. And in October, we're going to be engaging in a strategic planning process as a board and a school community. Now, sometimes people yawn a little bit when they talk about strategic plans, right? But we're going to be working with Walt Hanline. And if for those of you who've worked with Dr. Hanline before, you know he will not bore us at all. He will actually challenge us in many ways. So why are we doing this? So really, we're at a place where we really need to start planning for the next 5 to 10 years. It's our 30th year of operations this year, and we just received a 7-year renewal on our charter, right? So that gives us kind of a good baseline. But we also have some really important accountability reports that are coming. We're going to be, in a few years, engaging another WASC self-study and reaccreditation process. We also, in a next school year, are going to be working on a new LCAP. So even though it feels like we just got our new LCAP, we're already going to be working on a new one. As we talked about in Laura's presentation, we have all this new baseline data that's starting to come in, right? And so it's a real conversation about, we almost can't look at 2019 and before because we're a different school with a different student population now. And so we have this new baseline data. And we need to start planning for leadership transitions. We looked at our board of directors terms tonight, and we have one board member terming off, and our Jonathan, who's been our legal advisor, is also terming off the board. But if you look ahead, remember our board terms are basically all board members can serve 3 2-year terms under the new bylaws. And so we're going to actually have some board member transition as well. Not to mention, we have very experienced administrative staff. Realize the typical lifespan of an administrator and a director or principal position is like 5 years. And most of us are at 5 to 7 years. So it's not unreasonable that we might have some of our administrators terming off. Also, especially in the case of PFAA, we have some significantly veteran staff that have been here a very long time. And they came right after Ting and Charlie, started the school, and Ting and Charlie just retired. So they're actually going to be our next group of leaders sort of retiring outside of our school community. And the other thing too, is I always try to keep in mind, it's looking a little humbling for, at least like for Addie, Laura, and I, and Anita, is we're the last directors that are going to have had a close working relationship with the founders of the school. So anyone who comes after us, more than likely, will not have known Ting or Charlie, nor sort of our origin story of who we are and all the things. And certainly we'll do the best job that we can to sort of transition that knowledge and that information. But all of this sort of speaks to, we're at a real place where it's time for us as a community to come together and say, who are we and where are we headed exactly? And how do we own that as a community rather than, oh, Ting and Charlie know where we're heading as a community, or Jennifer's been on the board a really long time, so she knows where we're heading as a community, right? So next slide. So when we go through strategic planning, especially with the group with Walt Handling that we're going to be working on, it really is, there's going to be 3 questions that we're going to be tackling. First, how do we prioritize all of the objectives a school must accomplish? So in Walt's Center for Leadership Development and School Board Governance team, one of the things that they've created is a list of 20 things that schools are responsible for. We're responsible for student mental health. We're responsible for math scores and English scores. We're responsible for making sure we attract and retain high qualified staff, right? So we have these 20 different things, but we can't do all of the 20 things perfectly all of the time. So how do we rank them? Which one of those things are most important? And I know every leader in this room, we're not good at ranking things. We want to do all of the things, right? And so it's kind of a conversation about like, how do you really rank those things? Because then that's how you're tying financial resources to things. So if as a school community, let's say mental health is our #1 thing that we're most concerned about, then as new dollars are coming in, we really should be associating those new dollars with additional mental health services. Similarly, if attracting and retaining, high quality talent is our #1 priority that we're working on, then any new dollars that are coming in really should be sort of attached to that. And then for each of those 20 objectives, how do we measure success, right? Like, how do we know we're making progress up that mountain with the math scores? Is it 5% growth a year? Is it 3% growth a year? Similarly, when things around mental health or attracting and retaining talent, like, what do we want to do? Do we have salaries that are at least as competitive as the school district, or do we want to be beyond that, kind of setting those goals? And then finally, do our financial plans match our priorities? And so when we're thinking about our reserve policy or the budget that we're adopting, are we, if we at the end of, if Anita closes the books and we have $500,000 that is falling out of the budget, where's that money going? Are we just sort of putting it in our general fund, or are we saying facilities is #1, so we're actually moving it into our facilities budget? And so with the strategic planning, we're really going to kind of answer those 3 questions, and it lets us as a leadership group leave a document that reflects our community for anyone else that is coming onto our board or coming in as an administrator, that it's like, no, this is where we're heading. Joe may have left and there might be a new executive director coming in, but this is still where we're heading, right? So it lets us really have that sort of common document. Next thing. And so what are the logistics? So we do have 3 facilitators from the National Center for Executive Leadership and School Board Development. I keep teasing Walt, who really should have come up with a simpler name, because every time I try to say that, I forget what the words are. But so Walt Handling will be working with us. Walt, for those of you who don't know him, is a very veteran school superintendent and administrator and teacher in California, Oregon, and Washington. And then Mary Hopewell is actually a retired school administrator with kind of an HR and curriculum background, who will actually be working with us. And Fred Van Vleck is a current superintendent on the Pacific Coast. And he does a lot with school development and resource allocation. So we'll actually be doing strategic planning 3 days in October. So October 20th, 21st, and 22nd. The date and time that the board needs to have on their calendar is the 22nd from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. You should have calendar invites for that. But basically what we're going to do is on the 20th and 21st, we'll have about 40 community members. So those will be teachers, parents, staff members, some students. You guys will be getting invitations soon. Stay tuned. If they're available, they'll be coming and joining us. And on the 20th, our focus is really reviewing our mission and vision. Is it still relevant? Do we need to tweak? Do we need to do things differently? Also ranking those 20 priorities. So as a school community, like, what's #1? What's #2? And then on the 21st, then transitioning to how do we measure success with each of those objectives or priorities. And then on the 22nd, the Walt and his team will have actually created a draft strategic plan that then they'll be talking through the board with. And then that's an opportunity for the board to make adjustments or listen to what the community feedback was and adjust that. And then we will have a new strategic plan that will really guide the other things that we're doing moving forward at that point. Any questions I can answer about strategic planning? Do you need to go back to that slide so you can take a picture of the dates? Right, there you go. So like I said, for board members, you're only worrying about the 22nd. You actually don't have to worry about the first 2 days. Those are largely parents, teacher, staff, and students. All right, so any questions I can answer about strategic planning? Just to kind of give you a perspective of where we're heading and why we're doing it. All right, well, thank you.
All right. Executive Executive director comments?
So let's see, what kind of exciting things we have going on? I mean, students talked about homecomings, chalk it up, it was all awesome. But probably the biggest thing we have on the horizon is fall break is right around the corner. So October 1st through the 10th is fall break. So it's actually, we have 5 non-school days, and then the following Monday is non-school day, it's a staff development day. And then students will return on Tuesday, October 11th.
I beg to differ. We have something more exciting.
Okay, what did I miss?
That-
What did I forget?
The ELAC meeting.
Oh, yes, yes.
Our advisory committee meeting is Monday, September 26th. So if you're looking for something to do and you want to come and be a part, be right in here.
We actually
5:30 to 6:30.
Quite a few different advisory committees coming up. I know all the principals are kind of firing back up their various like coffee with the principal or, meeting events. We're trying to put them all on the sign out front. So watch the sign. I put everything out there. But for board members, it's also in your weekly updates. We're trying to put all the events there as well. So we have a lot of stuff. Also, it's a little bit later, but our first concert, Jazz at the Bend, will be coming up in October. And then our first production will also be towards the end of October, is Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone, yes, okay.
So we have some,
Last weekend in October.
yep, last week in October.
All right. Board of director comments, anyone?
Request,
Yes.
when we have our principals coming to do their presentations, if there are charts and things.
Yes, please.
We have to have them printed.
Printed, just too hard to see on those.
Very
Good to know.
Yeah.
No.
And I move through the slides so fast, I need to be able to.
All right, we'll do that.
Yeah.
You can bring physical copies of the slides.
Or we move the table closer to the. There's some of us who've been on this board a long time.
Our eyes.
And the print's getting smaller. Every year the print gets smaller.
Straining our eyes.
All right, we'll bring physical printouts of this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing it up. All right, and I just have a comment. Thank you to all of our staff, teachers, administrators, everyone who's navigating us through these really uncertain times. I understand there's a lot of, regulations and principles that you have to enforce that may not necessarily make sense to any of the parents, but they're dictated by the laws of our beautiful state. So thank you all, thank you for your patience, and thank you for our dedication to our students. And with that, unless anyone has any burning topics for our next meeting, I will adjourn us.
Yay.